wanted to highlight not a problem. Highlight some of the kids did a wonderful job. They were singing, they were dancing, and they really did, also highlighted some of the groundbreaking movements in Black history, or moments in Black history, excuse me. Also, we had our our students went to International Women's Day at Arcadia University just last week, and they participated in many activities. And then at the end of the day, they actually went to the women's lacrosse team played against the Eastern University, and the kids really had a great time. We're also, during the month of February, we've been pretty much celebrating Black history every single day. The teachers have been putting together displays and bulletin boards highlighting some of the student work. These are only 4 slides. I literally have about 20 different slides of student work representations focusing on Black history. Also, if you look around the room, you can see that there is a great deal of artwork that was put up by our art teacher, Mrs. Jamie Connolly, from our students. That's on display through the month of March. Please come out on March 30th. We're having an evening reception for parents, and where we'll be celebrating the artwork for the students. And also, just so that you're aware, the artwork, or at least 30 pieces of this artwork, is going to actually go to the Cheltenham Center for the Arts for their annual children's exhibit after this exhibit. As I said, we start each day with some affirmations. This is the affirmation the students have been learning, and they actually proclaim this on a daily basis. So I thought I'd proclaim it for you at this particular time. And it goes like this: this day has been given to me fresh and clear. I can either use it or throw it away. I promise myself that I shall use this day to its fullest, realizing it can never come back again. I realize this is my life to use or to throw away. I am the only person who has the power to decide what I will be. I make myself what I am because I am somebody. I am somebody. Respect me, protect me, never neglect me. My mind is a pearl. I can do anything in the world. If my mind could conceive it and my heart can believe it, I can achieve it because I am somebody. The children are learning this. Many of them already know it verbatim. Many times I'll ask them questions. One of the questions that came up recently is I said to the kids, what does it mean? And the kid knocked my socks off. What does it mean when it says, my mind is a pearl? And the kid turned around, the student said to her, that means that we're all unique. And the teacher said, and his teacher came to me later on the day and said, I was cheering, my whole class was cheering that he said that. We couldn't believe it, but he did. And again, we start each day at Glenside, making sure that everybody says that affirmation together as a community. So thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you, Principal Griffin. We have our student council representative. I don't see Dylan present. Okay, we will come back to that when we are able to get in touch with Dylan. Dr. Scriven will provide his superintendent's report.
So good afternoon, or I should say good evening, everyone. This evening, I have the opportunity to, for the first time, give a high-level overview of our strategic plan. This is really already in motion and will be our guiding document as we move through the 2023-2026 school year. I want to say this, or school years, plural. I want to say this. I did a 3-year rather than a 5-year. That was my recommendation to the board because I wanted to be a very fluid document that is a living document. And I felt that 5 years was too long in terms of really revisiting. But we're going to be revisiting this document, especially as a cabinet, day to day. We are not making mass copies of the document. It will be on our website, and there will be changes that we will be making. So I just wanted to start by prefacing and saying that. This has been a very intense process. As I look in the audience, I see a couple faces that were a part of the advisory committee. We have all of our cabinet members who were here that were a part of the advisory committee. And we have board of directors that were a part of that advisory committee. We brought in an outside vendor to assist us with facilitating the process. And there were several means of really getting stakeholder feedback. It was done via interviews. It was done through a survey process. And I want to say resoundingly that the Cheltenham community at large really played a powerful role in making sure that their voices were heard. We had close to 1,000 individuals who provided feedback on the surveys. And really, through that feedback, we were able to really capture what our current state is. And I know that the presentation is up there, but I'm just explaining the data gathering phase. That was how we gathered the data, was through those climate surveys or very intentional surveys that we wanted to hear the voice of what do individuals feel the current state of the district is, and then where are there opportunities for growth? And to be quite honest with you, what are our stretch points? You can go to the next slide. Through that, and we'll get there in the presentation, we were able to identify 7 goals. There's 7 targeted goals that we will be focusing on. And the implementation of this plan is really going to involve multiple stakeholders. There's different components, which I won't go into detail now, under different goals such as communication, where the community is going to continuously be involved in the process. One of the things that we'll be embarking on is really identifying what is our brand? What do we really say we stand for? We know that diversity and equity is a large piece of that, but we really want to go deeper, where through this process, we really walk away with a rich, robust understanding of who we are as a district and truly what we aspire to be. Next slide. So these are the 2 driving tenets, really, when you talk about mission and vision. And I'm just going to read them because I have to. This is something I can't paraphrase. The mission of Cheltenham School District is to provide inspiration and resources for every student to achieve academic excellence and pursue their highest potential by creating an equitable and inclusive community that fosters social and emotional well-being and a passion for learning. The vision: belong, engage, seek justice. Cheltenham School District is a community where all students know they belong, engage, and excel in their learning experiences, and are prepared to act as champions for social justice. We had 38 individuals initially really address what they felt the mission and vision should look like. They did a lot of the heavy lifting early. I was very forthright when we had our presentation done here in this same room, that the board would be afforded the opportunity to really look at what we recommended as a mission and vision, and fine tune and really have the final say. And this is the outcome of that work from a subset of our board of directors And I'll be quite honest, I really think it encompasses what the work should look like in our district. The bottom line and what I really want families to understand is that there is no cookie cutter approach as we try to address the needs of each and every one of our uniquely made students in this district. That is first, foremost, and paramount to our work. With that said, we hear a lot about 21st century. We are deep in the 21st century. There are jobs that our students will step into that have not been created, and it's our job to make sure that they are prepared for those opportunities. So we're going to be doing a very intentional, programmatic studies to really look and see and evaluate, are the programs that we currently have in place meeting the needs of our future world as a global society? So I want to be very clear, and this encompasses that. We cannot operate in a box. We've got to be growth oriented, and we have to be forward thinkers. We've really accomplished two portions of the phases thus far in terms of where we are in the plan. Phase one is the engagement. That's when we engage multiple stakeholders in terms of getting their voice. Phase two was the focus, is really creating the framework, coming up with what the 7 goals were going to be. Once those 7 goals were established, there were action teams that were established that developed action plans for each one of the 7 goals. We are now in phase 3 and have been in phase 3, but just this now formalizes our work from a system level and a system perspective. We're in the implementation stage. And that is where we are going to hold ourselves accountable for everything that you guys will see in the deeper action plans that will be uploaded to our website in the immediate future. Next slide. So when we look at the pillars here, the pillars, one encompasses our mission. And then you will see identified the 7 goals. And then in that blue, which I know you cannot read here because I can't even read it on my page, is a series of actions that will really cross-pollinate each one of those 7 goals. A lot of the work is interconnected. For instance, teaching and learning is going to go across each one of these goals. Communication in some form or fashion will intersect each one of these goals. And in the blue, it's really talking to our continuous improvement process. It's talking to our curriculum development. It's talking to our work around diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion, and what that will look like. It's talking about the professional development opportunities that will be created for our staff to give them the toolkit to appropriately meet the needs of each of our students. I really reference a plan, do, study, act cycle, which is our continuous improvement cycle that we will be following as we are constantly looking at data, evaluating how we're progressing towards those targets and those goals, and what do we need to do differently, and how do we need to adjust to make sure that we're meeting the instructional goals that we've set forth for ourselves. So as we go through, it will give you details with the order of the goals. Number 1, portrait of a graduate. Let me just say this about portrait of a graduate. One of the outcomes of this goal is that as our students are matriculating K through 12, we want to have very clear data points, or what I like to refer to as multiple measures, because there is no one measure to assess how our students are doing. There's multiple measures at every grade. As they're matriculating from kindergarten to first grade, our team will be working on what are those data sets, what are the standards that our students should be able to demonstrate mastery on to say that they are now currently at that first grade level as they've left kindergarten. And that will be a continual process as they matriculate through the 12th grade. So often, districts capture 12th grade alone as the snapshot of what they feel the student should have prior to going out into the real world, whether that be college, career, military, or workforce. And we want to capture that as we go through so that we're constantly assessing how our students are doing. One thing that we have principals doing right now, which is a sticking point for me, it's imperative that we're making sure that our students are reading on grade level prior to hitting third grade. So we're gauging that as we're moving through that continuum, okay? It's one of the data points that we will be closely monitoring. And I'm trying to be succinct, but my mind, I know this in and out. I'm thinking about, I'm looking at Mr. Swiger because I'm thinking about the goal for finance and facilities. And what jumps out is the fact that we have attributed a substantial amount of monies towards the strategic plan. You cannot have a strategic plan on paper in theory, but not have the resources to make sure that you can address the need to get us where we're aspiring to be. Full transparency, right now we have $2 million that are earmarked for our strategic plan. That may involve additional staffing. It may involve additional professional development, different consultants. We're really trying to tighten up our MTSS process. You guys will hear that until I'm blue in the face around the multi-tiered student support that we need to really be a resource and a support rather than over-representation of our students in special education. Right now, that is something we've identified and I personally see as being an issue and something that we have to address in this district. So portrait of a graduate. Next slide is teaching and learning. We recognize that there's been a learning loss across the nation as a result of the pandemic. We are really, and one of the things that really came to light was that we were operating in silos to a certain extent, meaning that there are best practices that are happening at certain schools, but not necessarily at all schools. And when we're really looking at teaching and learning, we are really trying to norm our practices. We are trying to make sure that from an operational standpoint, that we have standard operating procedures in place, that we have systemic protocols and processes in place that are being followed by every school. One piece of that right now is the way that we're approaching our school improvement process in terms of the expectation with really using data and building capacity in our professional learning communities and making sure that our schedules truly reflect programmatically what we see as being needs in each respective schoolhouse. This is an area where it's going to take a little time and we're going to constantly have to assess mindset. You're going to hear that, but there is such thing as that fix first, that growth mindset. And I'm in a place right now where Cheltenham is so rich in tradition. And I'm really evaluating tradition to make sure that tradition is still best practice. Just because it's tradition does not mean that it's the way that we should continue to go about doing things. And that's all going to be part of teaching and learning. That social, emotional, next slide, please. This is huge. Another component that's come out really as something that has to be on the forefront. It's a non-negotiable. When we talk about a safe and orderly environment, when we talk about climate and culture, we have to include social and emotional. If the needs from that standpoint are not being met, students aren't available to learn. This is something that we're putting a lot of resources in. That's why I mentioned the MTSS that has to be tightened up and has to be a clear plan across the district. That's something that we should have fully built out prior to going into next year. That is my expectation. And I sent out the communication on EP, and I had this conversation with the board already. By no means am I saying that the small population is the problem population. And that's how that was perceived by some parents, not all. Some understood the point that I was trying to make. When we look at data, there are early warning indicators. Referrals are early warning indicator. Attendance is an early warning indicator. Grades are early warning indicator. We are using all of that to attempt to be proactive in meeting the needs of our students. That's all I was trying to articulate in that communication, that we have a small subset where there are early warning indicators that are letting us know that we have to differ the supports that we are rendering. It's really that simple. Next slide, please. Diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion. The belonging part has been included because the high school does a belonging survey every year, and I believe it's going to trickle down to the middle school. That is something that I want at all levels, where we're getting student voice based on them being able to give feedback on what is their lived experience and what is it that we need to do differently. This is an area also, everything is so important, but we have to amp this up. This is a non-negotiable. Our board has a strong equity statement. We need to make sure that everything that we're doing, we're looking through this lens in terms of making sure that there's no barriers to our students receiving the opportunities that they should. Next slide, please. Culture and climate for student success. Again, the belonging survey ties in to culture and climate. What is the culture and climate within each one of our buildings, because they're all different? What is the culture and climate of our district as a whole? That's part of what the branding is going to also reveal. So you see where a lot of these are interconnected. The work is not done yet. We're in the beginning stage of the process as we're in phase 3, and at the point where we can finally begin the true work towards implementation. Next slide, please. Communication, you can see some of the sub goals there. When I first onboarded, that was one of the major issues or concerns I heard were communication. For me, it's not just communication, but it's how you message. It's being proactive. It's being transparent. We're still working towards doing that, but now we're going to have a clear plan as to what is that going to look like for us as a district. So no one's guessing. It will be in black and white so that expectations are clear. Next slide, please. You can go to the last one. The last one is on infrastructure, finance, and facilities. We have a vendor on the docket tonight that is going to come in and do a feasibility study where they're going to look what are all the options that we have as a district to address our more immediate concerns, which are EP and the high school from a facility standpoint, but not just EP and Cheltenham High School, but what are we doing to make sure that we have a capital improvement process that is going to make sure we're proactive with the maintenance on all of our schoolhouses. But those are the two that are in the forefront when you look at the buildings that we occupy. If you've noticed, I did not mention this administrative building. This is last because this is where the adults are. I am working with the team to do the best we can. If I don't know how many from years ago, you can see it's painted. Except for this area, all the tiles are replaced. There's a leak here, which has to be addressed, but it's so refreshing. My art teacher from Glenside was in here and she had her winter parka on because it's usually freezing in this building, or she's worrying about water dripping on her. So things we can control, the low-hanging fruit, we're doing that. I have to give Mr. Swigert some kudos. He was a great hire. I know he will not make me eat my words, but Lou is up at a conference right now. I always look over because she's usually there as well. We have a laser focus and we understand the importance of being good stewards of your money. And we are going to be very intentional. I think over the last couple of years, we've demonstrated that this is a high priority of being fiscally responsible. There's no shenanigans, no funny business. There's an audit report, 73 pages that I believe is a part of board docs today where we have a clean findings. I pride myself on that as the team does and this board. So look forward to great things happening, but it's not in isolation, it's in partnership and it's going to be done collaboratively. This is just one meeting of many meetings. And when you go to the next slide, you kind of see the accountability model of the individuals that are on the team. These are the faces that will be moving the work. I have one vacancy right now in terms of the director of special ed that we will be interviewing for next week. And once that person adds the team, joins the team, we'll add them here as they will be playing an intricate role. And we will be reporting out to the board on a quarterly basis. Some will be written reports or presentations, and some will actually be a more formal PowerPoint presentation, which just captures our journey as we're moving through the year. So that concludes my report. I'm very excited because I feel like I've been flying by the seat of my pants to a certain extent. We now have a living document that will be our guiding document, and one that, as superintendent, I don't take promising things lightly. We will be following this very intently. And thank you and the board of directors for your patience, because I recognize this was long overdue, but I'm glad to be here tonight. I know that was a little longer than usual, but I thought that it was important that the community truly understand the direction that we're moving. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scriven. Mr. Diazio will provide sunshine announcement.
Thank you. There have been no executive sessions since the last public meeting, so nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diazio. Next, we have public comments on agenda items only. As listed on the agenda, folks that are either in the community can come up to the podium, announce your name and where you reside and the district if you have any questions or comments. Folks who are watching via Zoom or streaming can email CSD board meetings comments at cheltenham.org. If you're listening and watching via Zoom, you can raise your hand.
No raised hands yet.
No raising it. Okay. All right, so we will move on to the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved, Jennifer Loman.
Seconded, David Cohen.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Aye, the motion carries. Minutes are approved. And Mr. Schultz will provide our financial affairs report.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. The Finance Committee met on the evening of March 7th at the Administration Building with hybrid attendance as an option for members of the public. Following roll call and approval of February's committee meeting minutes, the committee was presented with an overview of the current balance sheet and statement of changes in fund balance as is standard. The numbers continue to look as we would expect for this portion of the year. The next agenda item, which made up the majority of the meeting, was a presentation of the 2021-2022 audit report, which is a report that will be voted on for acceptance by the board this evening. For those who are unfamiliar, an audit occurs annually in our school district and every school district, and it is a third party, an independent third party that essentially comes in and looks at the financial statements that are maintained by the district to ensure that they are accurate. In other words, they're there to make sure that all of the presentations we get throughout the year are indeed a reflection of reality. The highlights of the audit report are that the report expresses an unmodified opinion on whether the financial statements of the Cheltenham School District were prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, also known as GAAP. And what that means is they are indeed accurate. The numbers we've been receiving are being maintained correctly. The other large there's a lot to this report, and I would highly recommend that folks take a look at it. The report is downloadable by over through the website. If you go to the agenda for this meeting under the I have it written down, but I've lost where it is, but it's under the consent agenda item of this meeting. You can view the report. It's long, but it's worth looking at. The other highlight of the report is that the year ended with a surplus of a little over or a little under $8.3 million. I think the exact number is $8,297,420. Thank you, Mr. Swigart. Much of this was due to one-time revenues related to COVID, as well as one-time real estate transfer taxes and some reassessment settlements around various properties throughout the township, which is to say that is incredible news. But we also can't bank on that $8.3 million becoming recurring revenue, unfortunately. But it's still a reflection of a very healthy financial state in our district. Following the audit report, the board was presented with information regarding two items that will be voted on this evening by the board. The first is related to a firm to assist the district in performing a feasibility study. And the feasibility study is for those familiar, the township also recently did a feasibility study. It's looking at our facilities, and this study in particular would be looking at the facilities that Dr. Scriven mentioned earlier, focusing on the high school and Elkins Park, and essentially evaluating what are our options. The results of this study will help the district establish a 20-year facilities plan with many action steps between now and the next 20 years. The second item was an approval of a reverse tax appeal appraiser. This also was talked about the prior month. This is a separate, this would be a separate instance of an appraiser. And these are professionals that assist the district in the process of property assessments, which is kind of a routine thing, looking at properties in our township and making sure they're being valued appropriately. The next Finance Committee meeting will be held on the evening of April 11th, following the Facilities Committee meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Ms. Loman will provide the Educational Affairs update.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. The Educational Affairs Committee met at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023, in person and over Zoom. The video recording of the meeting can be found on the district's website, along with the 42 slides from the presentation. The meeting ran for approximately 2 hours and 25 minutes. So I'm going to do my best to summarize it and still be at least accurate. Supervisors from the district's Office of Special Education initially delivered a 45-minute presentation about the programming and supports provided to students with autism in the district. The remaining time of the meeting involved questions from board members and community members and responses from staff. Ms. Jacqueline D. Gianna Vittorio, Supervisor of Special Education for grades 5 through 6 and for autistic support, introduced the presentation and then turned it over to Dr. Tracy Link, who is Supervisor of Elementary Special Education for grades K through 4. Dr. Link provided a definition of autism spectrum disorder, and then she also provided demographic information about students identified with autism in the district. The district has a total of 156 students identified with autism as either a primary or a secondary exceptionality or disability. 126 of those students have autism as their primary disability. And of those 128, 102 are male and 26 are female. And then in addition, of the total 156 students identified with autism as either a primary or secondary diagnosis, 104 are Black. 29 are white, 9 are Hispanic, 7 are multiracial, 6 are Asian, and 1 is Native American. Ms. D. Gianna Vittorio then updated the committee on the status of the transition of the supplemental autistic support classrooms being run by the district this school year after having been operated by the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit for many years. That was really the purpose of this presentation, was to initially provide an overview of the status of the transition of those programs. She provided an overview of the logistics of the transition to district-run classes, including professional development provided to staff and details about the number and type of staff added by the district to run the supplemental autistic support classes that are found at 5 of the district's 7 schools. Those classrooms are in every school except for Glenside Elementary and Cheltenham Elementary. Ms. D. Giovannitorio's position itself is actually a new position added to support the autism program, as is that of Dr. Ryan Brown Beasley, who previously worked for the district in a contracted position, who's now on staff as a board certified behavior analyst for the district full-time. Successes and challenges of the transition were discussed. Successes include having more children with autism be educated with their non-disabled peers in their home school buildings and providing the flexibility to have more children with autism access learning support resources and other resources provided by the district. It's easier to do that now that the district controls the classrooms than when the MCIU ran the classrooms. Challenges include hiring and retaining appropriate paraprofessional support for students who need one-on-one assistance. Elementary education autism support programs were then reviewed by Dr. Lank. She discussed the staffing numbers in the autism support classrooms at Myers, Wyncote, and Elkins Park, and the curricula provided to students who receive instruction in those classrooms. Dr. Lank provided pictures of the visual supports used and cues used with students in the programs, and also pictures of sensory hallways in Myers and in Wyncote. She also detailed future goals for the K through 6 autism support program. And then Ms. D.G. Vantorio actually gave some examples of sample schedules for 2 4th graders to show how the programs are individualized to meet each child's strengths and needs. Then Ms. Allison Kukler, Supervisor of Secondary Special Education, reviewed the autistic support programs available at Cedar Brook and at Cheltenham High School. She explained how significantly more staff have been added by the district to support students with autism at each building than had been provided by the MCIU. She also discussed how the Skills for Life program at the high school is now coordinated with the autistic support program. Ms. Kukler reviewed individualized transition plans for two students with autism at the secondary level, one of whom has been offered full-time employment upon graduation, and one of whom attended Eastern Center for Arts and Technology for some time, and now would like to pursue college upon graduation. She also discussed future goals for the autistic support program at Cedar Brook and at CHS. Then staff also shared next steps regarding reaching out for consultation supports to examine the district program to evaluate for future planning. Many questions were then taken from board members and community members present over Zoom and in person. Questions centered around interpretation of the demographic information, key performance indicators for the success of the transition of the program, how students receiving supplemental autistic support were being included with their non-disabled peers, and the use of sensory rooms and hallways and calm down rooms in different school buildings. The meeting was adjourned at approximately 9:25. The next Educational Affairs Committee meeting will be held in person only on Tuesday, March 21st, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the auditorium at the administration building. The meeting will not be offered over Zoom because the topics covered will include project-based learning, K-4 makerspaces, and STEM, which I understand requires some in-person participation or viewing. So it's not going to be over Zoom. The presentation will review instructional practices for these programs, upcoming programming, and new resources. This ends my report.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Eastern Center for Arts and Technology, Mr. Burdell Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. The Eastern Center for Arts and Technology met on Wednesday, May 8th, 2023 at Eastern's facility on Turwood Road in Upper Moreland. There was not any discussion regarding items that required board approval, but I do have some key topic updates. First, for Student of the Month, Angelina Macris from Upper Moreland, who is a student in design, photography, and illustration program, was awarded March Student of the Month. Her accomplishments include designing the most recent Eastern holiday card and also completing 2 Tasty Cake print ads. She went on to share with the JOC and all the guests gratitude to the teachers and staff at Eastern for helping her through some anxiety and supporting her personal growth in her time as an Eastern student. Second, I want to take time to highlight one of our own CHS students, senior Tyson Foggy, who was recently awarded a presidential scholarship from High Point University in North Carolina, where he plans to pursue a dual major in game design and graphic design. Tyson was interviewed for an Eastern Spotlight and is currently on the Eastern Spotlight, and shared that his goal is to depict underrepresented groups appropriately and accurately in character designs. He went on to share that he knows how much joy it can bring seeing characters that look like you in landscapes where representation is typically not a priority. Additionally, his teacher, Miss Nicola Bruzzi, who also is the teacher of the Student of the Month, so great teacher. She shared that Tyson is always professional in the classroom and has a great deal of talent, focus, and ability. The scholarship that Tyson was awarded is such a great honor, and she looks forward to seeing his bright future unfold over the next few years. After completing college, Tyson plans on a career as a graphic designer or artist for a game studio. He also aspires to one day publish manga-inspired graphic novels of his own original stories and characters, ensuring all kinds of backgrounds are depicted. So you can read more about Tyson on Eastern's website right now, as he is currently highlighted as underneath the Eastern Spotlight. The JOC also received an update on the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology Equity Action Plan. This was started last year and approved in September with a climate and culture, started with a climate and culture survey that both students and staff participated in, as well as the formation mission around Eastern's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. We heard about a number of data points. Some of the points that stood out the most were the beginning of the disaggregation of performance data that's broken down per district, per student, and also per specific group of interest, whether that is by race or socioeconomic status. This information has been shared with the districts, and I believe Dr. Scriven with superintendents as like a first pass data review to begin to start to fulfill the goals of a plan. Moving on, in educational affairs, the JOC approved some Skills USA fundraisers to help sponsor students as they travel both to the local and state competitions. There was also the approval of 8 internship or co-ops, which brings Eastern to a total number of 22 internships or co-ops for students this year. Again, great opportunities for students to get real world experience and get paid to do it in most cases. The JOC also approved an MOU for the technical assistance program, which will give Eastern free access to NOCTI study guides and pre-tests, and a CTE distinguished school leader to help with free coaching, essentially a prep program for the NOCTI exam. There was also the approval of some donations for our collision repair program. Under policy, the JOC approved the 2023-2024 calendar. There's quite a bit of alignment with Cheltenham, including the spring break, which I know was quite difficult for Eastern to figure out, with 9 sending districts that all have 9 boards who have 9 different interests. But I think Eastern did a really good job. But again, specific to Cheltenham, our spring break aligns with that of Eastern. So good stuff. Personnel affairs. There was approval of a cosmetology substitute instructor, as well as approval of an adjunct educator for practical nursing. The JOC also ratified some approval overtime and continued employment. Additionally, another excellent, or let me say one of the key actions that the JOC makes is the approval of new occupational advisory committee members. Just for the knowledge of both the public as well as the board and all present, the Occupational Advisory Committee is relied on to establish curriculum, performance standards, and recommended tools and equipment. This group plays a key role in planning the instructional activities at Eastern. So, as stated, individuals from various occupations that could benefit or would like to see the development of the individual programs at Eastern better fit that of the needs of, quite frankly, the particular area of interest relative to a student's experience at Eastern. So again, that's a part of the continuing efforts to keep Eastern's programs current. Lastly, under facilities and financial affairs, something that we don't see very much, the approval of a change order for a credit of $70,000 for a project, for some unused allowances for an electrical project. Again, most of the time, I think our change orders are in the absolute opposite direction. So this one, from the perspective of the JOC and also for the knowledge and again, understanding of the community, again, a credit bonus, if you will, for us. Full brief that covers any additional details that I didn't cover here can be found on Eastern's website at eastech.org. Next month's meeting will be held via Zoom on Wednesday, April 12th, 2023. And that link can be found on Eastern's website. Thank you very much. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Burdell Williams. The MCIU report will be provided by Ms. Lohman.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. The Montgomery County Intermediate Unit Board met on Wednesday, February 22nd, 2023 at 6:45 in person at the MCIU's main offices in Norristown and also over Zoom. I was not actually in 2 places at one time, since that was the same time as the Educational Affairs Committee meeting. My report is from the notes provided by Dr. Regina Speaker, who's the Executive Director of the MCIU. So just a few highlights from the meeting include an overview actually of the Office of Community and Government Relations that is provided as a service to MCIU members. Tina Valletto, who many of us know, former school board member here in Cheltenham, is the director of that office, and she provided the MCIU board and audience with an overview and update of that office's services and initiatives. Dr. Speaker announced that the MCIU will be conducting its annual election process to seat board members to a new 3-year term beginning July 1st, 2023, and the 7 school districts included in this year's rotation are Cheltenham, which we'll be voting on later, Hatboro, Horsham, Norristown, North Penn, Pottstown, Springford, and Upper Merion. Dr. Speaker introduced auditors from Barbicane Thornton and Company, who presented the results from the MCIU's annual audit of the fiscal year, which ended June 30th, 2022. The audit firm was pleased to announce, and the MCIU board was pleased to hear that there were no significant findings. And the board accepted the 2021-2022 audited financial statements from Barbicane Thornton LLP. The IU board approved several budgets for the 2023-2024 school year, including transportation services, Head Start program budget, Office of Technology Services, and the statewide system of support ATSI federal funds budget. The board also approved a memorandum of understanding between the IU and the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit Educational Association for extended school year rates. And then there was a human resources update. The IU hired 15 new employees in the past month, 6 resignations, and offered 1 professional contract to a tenured employee. So the next MCIU board meeting will be held in person and over Zoom in Norristown at the IU's main building at 6:45 on Wednesday, March 29th, 2023. This ends my report.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Mr. Cohen will provide the facilities report.
Yes, thank you. The Facilities Committee meeting was held on March 7th. And meeting was chaired by Mr. Charles Burdell Williams. The minutes from the February 7th Facilities Committee meeting were approved. There was then a presentation about a series of items. The first was Cheltenham High School about a fire alarm situation. Next, there was presentation on Cheltenham High School kitchen improvements and discussion on kitchen inspections throughout the district. That was followed by a brief presentation about a new softball shed replacement at the high school. And then a discussion about Elkins Park kitchen improvements. There was a discussion also about Elkins Park sewer line cleaning that had been completed. There was then an open discussion about facilities capital improvements and building systems maintenance and upgrades. The next Facilities Committee meeting is scheduled for April 11th at 7 p.m. That completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen, but you're still up for the liaison group.
Yes, thank you. And actually having issues here with my computer, so bear with me. Thank you. The liaison group met on February 27th at 8 a.m. by Zoom. And by way of background, the liaison group is a group of township staff and commissioners and school board senior staff and also board members that discuss issues of mutual concern and provides updates and ways of cooperation. First, the agenda was a potential sale of Linwood Hall, discussion about that property. Next, there was a discussion about township facilities update that was mentioned earlier tonight by Mr. Schultz. And a report should be done, my understanding is sometime this month, about the township facilities. That was followed by a discussion about bus patrol. And bus patrol is a program with a private company that has cameras mounted to the exterior of the bus that are aligned with the stop arms on the bus that then take photos of drivers that ignore or violate or pass by their stop arms. And the bus patrol program is still in the process of being implemented. It's going through a series of review in the township in terms of procedural issues, and there will be marketing information on the bus patrol program before it goes live. That was followed by discussion about traffic safety at the end of Gimbel Park, and there's a new trail that's being built that's going to end at New 2nd Street and Tiffany Creek Parkway near the Elkins Park School, and the township is looking at ways of making that into a controlled intersection before that part of the trail opens up. There was then a series of conversations about intersections near Myers Elementary around safety and speeding and traffic issues. And the township is evaluating the intersections near the elementary school. It's a very challenging property for those not familiar with it, with a number of streets. And they're looking at ways of improving safety and reducing speeding in the area near Myers Elementary. There was then clarification on the locking of Cheltenham High School bathroom policies and issues that Dr. Scriven addressed. The township then spoke about a plastic bag ordinance, which is due to go into effect during January of 2024. There will be some exceptions to the bag ordinance, but in general will apply to takeout and restaurants and also supermarkets, with the exception of some items. There was then, under old business, Commissioner Rappaport congratulated the district on student achievements. Commissioners Norris and Brockington commented about good communication from the school district. Under new business, Dr. Scriven mentioned completing the strategic plan, which she spoke about earlier tonight. And that communication will be a targeted goal in the strategic plan. And there was some conversation about the plan. Under announcements, Acting Township Manager Elliott discussed a new Parks and Recreation coordinators working on a plan for summer park programs and pools in the township. Dr. Scriven thanked Commissioner Brockington for making himself, Commissioner Brockington, available to students and for his support of students in the district. The next liaison group meeting is scheduled for Monday, March 20th at 8 a.m. by Zoom. That completes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Ms. Haywood will provide the policy committee update.
Thank you, Ms. Henry. On Tuesday, February 28th, 2023, the policy committee met in a hybrid format at 7 p.m. After roll call, the minutes of the January 24th meeting were approved. The agenda under old business included 4 policies specific to special education and behavioral support, 3 which are presented on the consent agenda this evening for adoption. 1 that will go back to the policy committee meeting at its next meeting this month for further review as a repeat first read, and 7 policies under new business that will be posted this evening as first read policies. The policies presented this evening for adoption are Policy 113, Special Education, a policy from 2009 that sets forth the requirements for providing special education in compliance with applicable law. Next is Policy 113.1, Screening and Evaluation for Students with Disabilities. And last is Policy 113.3, Discipline of Students with Disabilities. This is a new policy based on a PSBA template, which has been customized for local practices. Cross-reference to Policy 218, Student Discipline, and Policy 829, Equity, were added to this policy. None of the policies 113, 113.1, or 113.3 presented this evening to the board for adoption were materially changed from the policies that were first reads presented at the last month's meeting. Please note that administration is working on accompanying administrative regulations for ARs related to these policies. Development of the ARs should not impact the board's approval of Policy 113, 113.1, or 113.3, as ARs are administrative guidance for implementing policies and are not approved by the board. Policy 113.2, Behavior Support, a policy from 2011, will go back to the policy committee as a repeat first read. This means that the policy committee will have an opportunity to review Policy 113.2 the second time in its next meeting. The committee will review any updates to the policy based on an extensive discussion at the February meeting and taking into account concerns expressed about the use of seclusionist behavioral intervention for students with disabilities. The following policies are posted as first read policies this evening and do not require board action. They include Policy 011, Principles for Governance and Leadership. Again, this is a policy pretty recent from 2022. The principles were revised last year by PSBA statewide committee. PSBA is the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. Given our commitment to equity, the PSBA principles were modified by the board to include equity principles that guide our governance, leadership, and decision-making. Another first read policy is Policy in AR 829, District-wide Safety, again, a 2022 policy, which provides our safety training requirements for staff. Policy in AR 709, Building Security, is being posted as a first read policy. It's from 2013 and being posted for repeal. Policy in AR 236, Threat Assessment, 2021 policy. Policy 827, Conflict of Interest, a policy from 2016. Policy in AR 825, Reporting of Waste and Wrongdoing in District Operations, which is technically our whistleblower policy from 2015. And lastly, Policy 920, Non-School Organizations, groups, and individuals, a 2020 policy. In closing, I just want to thank Mr. Diasio, Ms. Jackson, who's not here this evening, Dr. Scriven, and Dr. Smith, and other administrative staff who have really put in a cycle of review of all of our policies. So we're really coming back to looking at policies that we looked at a while ago, but we're not looking at very dated policies. So thank you very much for ensuring that we have that cycle in place. The next policy committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March the 28th, 2023 at 7 p.m. in a hybrid format. All are welcome to attend. This concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Haywood.
You're welcome.
Mr. Epps will provide a legislative update.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, directors, administrators, and members of the community. As representative of the Montgomery County School Board Legislative Committee, we meet almost every month to discuss proposed and adopted legislation and also issues requiring advocacy with our elected officials. During each legislative meeting, I will share updates on topics that impact public education. The legislative committee will convene tomorrow, March 15th, 2023, via Zoom. However, I do have just a couple of updates. Last week, Governor Shapiro presented their 2023-24 proposed state budget. Education was a major theme of the proposal as it represents one of the largest increases in the budget overall. The proposal contains about $567 million or 7.8% increase for basic education funding for the entire Commonwealth, and an $104 million, also 7.8% increase for special education funding. These increases essentially cover increase in costs due to inflation over the last last year. For Cheltenham, this proposal would equate to an increase of just under $900,000 for basic education and just under $300,000 for special education. Also included in the proposal are funds for school environmental repairs and improvements, universal free breakfast and expanded free lunch to students previously only eligible for reduced price lunches, and also $100 million for school-based mental health and support block grants. And so those will be available to districts throughout the entire Commonwealth. We'll certainly be able to hear more as discussions continue. You might be wondering, what about that lawsuit and the decision that passed? This budget proposal does not use a new funding system as required by the recent Commonwealth Court decision. Those reforms will take time as it entails creating an entire new structure and funding formula for our education funding. So they're very clear. The mandate was received, and it will take some time for the legislator and executive to figure that out. This is the beginning of the appropriations process. So there are, again, I was intentional to say proposal a number of times. These numbers are not final. And so the hearings will commence to really dig deeper into the budget request. The Pennsylvania Department of Education will present to the House Appropriations Committee on March 20th and to the Senate Education Committee on March 29th. Thankfully, the House Appropriations Committee assignments have been made. And so we have representatives here in Cheltenham that hold some important roles. Representative Napoleon Nelson has been assigned to the Education Committee, and Senator Art Haywood is a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee. And so again, both of those are vital roles in advocating for our children and youth and also those around the entire Commonwealth. It is Women's History Month, and for the first time, both houses of the legislature are led by people who identify as women. Senator, and so I'll honor them in this moment. Senator Kim Ward, thank you. Senator Kim Ward of Westmoreland County is the Senate pro tempore, and Representative Joanna McClinton from Philadelphia is the Speaker of the House. And so since my last report, Representative McClinton was elected as the first woman and second African-American to serve as Speaker of the House. And as previously mentioned, Senator Ward is the first woman to serve in their position. And so we congratulate again, and I truly believe everyone in society will have a deeper sense of freedom when our society truly honors the freedom of Black women. And so with that, it concludes my legislative report. As a reminder, we will convene again tomorrow, March 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Epps. Next, we have the approval of agenda items as listed. Have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second, Julie Haley.
Do we have any comments from the board on any of the items? Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you. Just two comments. One, as always, we have our volunteers to be approved. And again, we have a number of them. And I know that some of them are due to the Elkins Park School's upcoming peak trip, which I am excited to chaperone as a parent. This trip has not happened since 2019. It's a longstanding tradition in the district. Many of the teachers and the staff that work at Elkins Park School went on this trip themselves when they were sixth graders. So I'm super excited that this trip is back and that we have so many parents and guardians and adults coming along with us. So thank you to everyone who has worked on that. And secondly, I just want to make note of two of the retirements. Two teachers that both work at Elkins Park School. One, Mrs. Lisa Marlowe, who happens to be my daughter's teacher right now, and my older daughter had her as well, and I know other board members' children. An amazing teacher. We are so lucky to have had her for as long as we have, and she told my daughter's class 2 years ago she was retiring. She was retiring this year. We got her 2 more years, and I think this, it's for real this time. So thank you to Mrs. Marlowe and all that she's done for our students, really opening their eyes and their experiences to the history of the Holocaust and getting them in front of Holocaust survivors and being able to, it's not going to be very much longer that our students, our kids, ourselves are able to see these, these living pieces of history, these men and women who, fought so hard. So very grateful for her and her work. Mr. Altman, my children did not have him, but he is a smiling, happy face every time I've been at Elkins Park School. So we will miss him as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lohman?
Thank you, Ms. Henry. I had a couple questions actually about some of the attachments, and I apologize for not posing those questions perhaps prior to the meeting. I didn't see some of the attachments. So I was curious about the I was just looking at the recommendation for the facilities or the feasibility study. And looking at the brochure attached, and it looks incredibly impressive. And I'm just wondering the decision-making process that ultimately went into that recommendation and how we chose this firm over the other ones that were under consideration.
Mr. Swigert?
Sure. So back in January, we advertised that the district was seeking a professional to assist in capital planning through a feasibility study. We advertised this through several local publications. We gave 3 weeks of advertisement. We opened all of the respondents at the same time on the same time of day. We took those respondents, we evaluated everyone based on their resume, based on their experience in the Philadelphia area. And then we narrowed that down to three firms who met the top of those categories. And then we interviewed those 3 firms in person to narrow it down to this final selection for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Swigert. What made KCBA stand out over the other 2?
A member of the board to speak up, or?
Sure. If anyone, I'm happy to chime in with my opinion. I think that they serve a lot of school districts, particularly in this part of Montgomery County. And Mike Kelly, the lead on their firm, is very active in the legislature in Harrisburg and very on top of changes to the Plan Con funding for capital improvements, as well as legislative changes as it relates to capital planning and school districts.
And just to clarify, there were also members of the board, the co-chairs of the Finance Committee and the Facilities Committee were all in attendance of those interviews. And so we had an opportunity to provide input. I will just say personally, everything that Mr. Swigert said, but also worth highlighting that several, I believe two of the folks who would be working on the project are residents of Cheltenham, which is a meaningful fact. And then also this is also the firm that is working with the township. And so there's potential synergy in, they have a pretty deep understanding of the community and the community's needs through the fact that they've been investigating it over the past year. And so they're coming in with a bit of a head start, and there might be opportunity for synergies in our plans with their plans.
Thank you. Mr.
Yeah, I'll add as well. So for me, yeah, all of what was shared by both Dan and Mr. Swigert were also key components for me. I'll just double down on the specific focus and experience with Montgomery County and with the local area, right? So very unique right here in southeastern PA for a number of reasons, right? Our land is at a premium, right? And there's some pretty difficult challenges from a site planning perspective that I think are very unique to our locality that we don't necessarily share with the vast majority of the state. And I could just share that I felt that that KCBA had a significant amount of experience just in and around Montgomery County, but really just in and around Philadelphia specifically, not just in Montgomery County. And I felt that was something that we could truly benefit from when compared to some of our other folks who were included in that process.
You can add one more thing.
I apologize for coming back to the mic, but I am remiss for not mentioning that of the 4 architects from that actually team, it wasn't just KCBA. There was another group that's with them called Revision, and they so half of the team that presented to us had a very strong focus on sustainability. And obviously, we need to be caring about a lot of things, but at this time in human history, being able to say that we are with fidelity thinking about sustainability and resilience, I think that's a very important feature of this group.
Okay. I also want to acknowledge Ms. Lohman is serving another term on the MCIU board. And so we're glad to have you continue in that role, Ms. Lohman.
Thank you. And thank you for those. That's very helpful.
Thank you for asking the question. Also, I just want to thank, I know Ms. Lohman did start, not Ms. Lohman, excuse me, Ms. Mulhern did start to, she shared some gratitude to our volunteers. I know I've shared that at a number of legislative meetings in the past, right, with all of the work that's gone into getting us to a point where we've had that safe return to schools, and we have the ability to continue to create the environment where our community can contribute from a volunteer perspective with amazing trips like the Peak trip that my daughter attended a couple of years ago. I'm really, again, encouraged by the long list of volunteers that we're continuing to see, and definitely appreciate our community for continuing to bring themselves into the school building to support, again, the development of community and support of education in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Mr. Fishbein.
hate to pile on, but Mrs. Marlowe, I think I've said nice things about her in meetings before, but just the amount that she does on her Holocaust education, which has been mentioned, but also her scholarship, and she's a scholar, but she's a middle school teacher. She's a published author about the history of where we live, and that infuses her instruction as well, so that it's just so unusual to have that kind of a gem in the community. And she is really, really proactive about sharing those things that she does with the community on social media. So the profile of her and our district as a result of her is increased by everything that she does, and she will be sorely missed.
Mr. Cohen?
And Andrew Altman is a friend, so thanks for your service, Andrew.
And following up on that, I do want to say that, I don't want to repeat what everybody else said about Ms. Marlowe and also Mr. Altman, but my understanding is that Ms. Marlowe will still be working in the community in a nonprofit. And my hope is that the district can forge relationships with her in your capacity, working on Holocaust studies.
Great.
So we're not fully losing her. We're losing her as an employee, but I think there's still an opportunity to hopefully reach out to her and have her be engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. Ms. Haywood?
I'm gonna plus one everything that people say about Ms. Marlowe without repeating any of that. But also to note that she's also the curator of a small Holocaust museum at Knesset, Israel Synagogue as well. So even though she won't be teaching Holocaust studies within the school system, you still will be able to visit the museum. KI.
Thank you.
I have one question though, unrelated to, and I don't know Mr. Altman, but I wish him well as well. But for the all-steel contract, I know that they'll be working with our students. Do we generally provide them with our policies up front or before they start an engagement? In terms of our discipline policy, I know that there was some language in the rider about if they use restraints with a student, they will comply with applicable PA law, as well as there's language in the rider that says they'll also comply with applicable district policy. So I just want to be comfortable that they're seeing some of those policies as it relates to discipline of students with disabilities prior to their starting. Particularly because we're focused on equity and restorative care practices.
Yes.
Make sure we don't. No, I simply commented that that's a great point. I need to make sure that we're doing that. So I'm gonna have to circle back because I don't know unless Dr. Smith or someone else at the table has that update. First time that's been posed. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the rider that you're seeing on that contract is something new that we're doing. We're going to be attaching that to a number of contracts moving forward that can supplement standard contracts that we get from vendors that work with our students, that supplement the terms that better protect the district, better protect the privacy interests of our students, and more clearly clarify our expectations. One of the other provisions that should be in that rider is a commitment that the vendors have to comply with any applicable board policies or applicable law that apply to the work that they would be doing under that contract. And generally what I can say is when I've seen other districts implement these new riders, contractors will ask and say, we're not used to seeing a rider like this. We see this language in here. What policies do we need to be familiar with? And that's actually good when we see that they're proactive like that, because it shows us that they're reading that. And I think we'll work with the administrative department heads that are going to be implementing these contracts to know which policies to point the vendors to. So I think it's a good point. You'll probably be seeing more of these, and we'll, as you mentioned, Dr. Scriven, make sure that we're implementing with fidelity.
Thank you. I actually have one more comment and then two questions, but my comment is to thank Dr. Scriven and his entire team and everyone who worked on the development of the strategic plan. I know that has been a tremendous project to move it to this point. Particularly having a board who likes to provide input. So we, as one board member, I really appreciate everything that your team has done and all of the community members and the staff, teachers, everyone who spent a tremendous amount of time the last summer working on the plan and moving it forward. I'm excited about where we're going and where it will be leading our children and our staff moving forward. So I just wanted to thank you for that. My two questions are about two smaller contracts that we're being asked to approve. One is a proposal for behavior educational consultant with Brett DeNovi and Associates. I'm wondering what that contract, what services are being contracted for, why we're I don't know, you know what I'm trying to say, what that's for. And then the other contract is for Miss Arlen Johnson to provide mentoring services to CHS students. Also curious about what that entails. I don't disagree with either of them. I'm just wondering what they're for.
So I'm good with number 2. Does someone from the team have number 1? The first one.
Is number 1 the behavioral services?
Yes, it's this one.
Yes, we're contracting because we're having a difficult time finding paraprofessionals and other aides who are qualified and have safety care training and other certifications required to deal with some of our students who exhibit some challenging behaviors. So this is our way of making sure that not only do we have staff, but we have qualified, certified, and prepared staff to work with specialized populations of students.
This is the RBTs. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the second one is someone that I personally identified to push in at the high school, especially during community lunch, to work with our young men and our young women. He is a professional personal trainer, but also does mentorship. So I'm combining the physical health aspect with the motivational aspect as another component of structure during that community lunch hour. So he'll be working in that capacity.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Mr. Schultz.
I just feel the need to say thank you to Mr. Swigart and Ms. Kim. I mentioned earlier the audit report, and it came back. For context, this audit was for a year where we had a lot of transition. And Ms. Kim in particular kind of took the lead on doing a huge amount of effort to keep things moving smoothly. And so the fact that the report has come back unmodified and with great outcomes is very significant. And so I know she's not here right now, but also Mr. Swigart under your leadership as well. So thank you both. And yeah. And I won't raise my hand again.
I would just like to say Lou deserves the vast majority of that credit.
Okay, now we will take the vote. So all in favor, say aye. Aye.
We had a motion.
We did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. No, we did the motion.
I
We had the-
moved.
we did the motions and we did the comment. Okay.
Aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Okay, we did not have any public questions that needed to be responded to.
Ms. Henry,
Yes.
let's go back to public comment on non-agenda.
You know, I just skipped right over that. And we had so many comments here. Just wasn't the public. Sorry about that. Thank you, Ms. Hayward. Next, we have public comments on non-agenda items. And so the community who is present are welcome to come up to the podium, state your name and where you reside in the community. If we have anyone via Zoom, you can raise your hand. And if you are watching via streaming, you can email us.
My name is Lauren Pembroke. I live in the Roland Park section of Cheltenham. I'm a board member for the Special Education Alliance of Cheltenham. And I'm reading this statement on behalf of another district parent. I'm speaking out tonight to raise awareness within the school board and Cheltenham community around the regular use of involuntary seclusion and restraint in our schools with children as young as 5 years of age. To protect my child's identity, I've chosen to remain anonymous and have asked a Sikh member to read this on my behalf. My purpose in sharing our story is to call for the end of these punitive practices to protect the emotional well-being of our children. My son is a bright child with a natural curiosity about the world and an intrinsic love of learning. He struggles with self-regulation and impulsivity and has diagnoses of autism and ADHD. He has an IEP for services and supports. He started kindergarten virtually during COVID closures at Cheltenham Elementary School. At that time, the district recommended sending some students with IEPs and support needs into the buildings for improved learning. After carefully weighing the pros and cons, we agreed to send him. We had high hopes he would connect with his peers, teachers, make a friend or two, get comfortable in his classroom, and enjoy the many firsts that come with kindergarten. Sadly, during his first few days of kindergarten, his first time ever in a large public school building, first time meeting his teacher and behavior specialist in person, first time spending a 6.5-hour day at school away from his family, he was restrained and secluded multiple times by district teachers and MCIU contractor behavior support personnel, the same people who were entrusted to ensure his safety and well-being. On multiple occasions, he was physically restrained with the use of holds on his forearms, pushed against a filing cabinet or against the classroom wall, then removed from his classroom in front of his peers and involuntarily confined to a small locked room called the sensory room at the far end of the hallway, with unpadded cinder black walls and floor, no seating or other equipment. We were told this was a calming measure to help him regulate when he was frustrated. It had the opposite effect. The reason reported by his team for using these measures was he was denied access to something he wanted in the classroom. That something could have been a small toy or a glue stick or a game. The current school policy for use of seclusion and restraint outlines that these punitive measures are to be used as a last resort when there's a clear danger of self-harm or the harm of others. The average 5-year-old is 40 inches tall and 42 pounds. My son was restrained by adults who were more than 3 times his weight. Did he get angry, yell, scream, maybe throw things, try to run away? Yes. Did he pose a serious threat of harming himself or others? No. It's easy to assume and even perhaps justify that these compliance-driven policies are reserved for the oldest students in our high school, who may become aggressive and require support to calm down and keep everyone safe. In reality, the policy is applied to students of all ages, and those with disabilities and developmental delays are disproportionately harmed. On one occasion, my son was reportedly held by his forearms for 30 seconds until being released. Imagine how long 30 seconds lasts to a young child in flight or fight mode, a child who is just learning to separate from his parents for the first time and adjusting to spending a long school day, learning tons of new rules, a child who is learning to build trusting relationships with new adults outside of their world, the adults their parents are entrusting their care and safety to. He was held alone in this confined space while Cheltenham administrators and staff observed him from outside the room via a small window in the door. The door was locked and or held shut by his aide, who was meant to be a supportive, safe person for him. There is no evidence that supports any skill building comes from the use of these punitive discipline measures, regardless of the age of the child. He did not feel safe once these incidents occurs, and he continued to tell us he didn't feel safe in school and begged to stay home. He became demotivated to learn. His anxiety grew bigger and bigger as time went on, and his separation anxiety increased. He had nightmares and difficulty sleeping. His demeanor visibly changed when he walked into the school building. His shoulders would slump, his flat expression, his mood more irritable. These experiences have created lasting trauma for him as well as our family. He continues to struggle with separation anxiety in community settings and a heightened anxiety of small confined spaces like public restrooms. He's working hard in therapy to learn to trust adults outside of his family like teachers, coaches, and therapists. We have a responsibility to our children to seek out compassionate, trauma-informed practices to help support children with behavioral needs in school and ensure their well-being and safety. I implore you to consider ending these practices. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from anyone in the community? Okay. All right. Okay, our next item is our future meetings as listed. Ms. Mulhorn, I think you wanted to make a comment about the next educational affairs.
Sure. Ms. Lohman did comment in her report, but just because next week's educational affairs meeting is so different than all of our meetings have been recently, I just wanted to point it out again that next week, March 21st, 7 p.m., the meeting will only be in person. I encourage you to come out and find out what PBL, project-based learning, is all about. We will be in this room. Again, there will not be a Zoom option. So hopefully we'll see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
And I said I wouldn't raise my hand again, but I realized I failed to mention during my report to highlight that the Financial Affairs Committee meeting is 1 week later than usual, just because of spring break. And that also will apply to the Legislative Committee meeting, but it is normally the first Tuesday. Next month, it will be the second Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Dr. Scriven?
To our parent that just addressed the board and the cabinet members and myself, I'm not in receipt of that report. So if you could see Ms. Harding after the meeting, just to make sure that she has a copy, I'll make sure that I follow up and address. So thank you.
Yeah, and it felt odd for that statement to be made with no reaction from us. So my empathy goes out to this family, and I will commend the administration to look into. Obviously, we can't draw conclusions but that it requires investigation is obviously apparent. And I didn't want the meeting to end without saying something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Fishbein. Can we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Okay, Ms. Lohman.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned.